This is a love letter to all of those who are in the in-between. This is for those who feel like they've left one chapter and they haven't yet started the other. This is for those who are desperate to find a sense of home, even in the unknown. When you are no longer who you once were, but you're still not who you are becoming. The ache of longing for there to be a completion. The restlessness of being in what is instead of what could be. Ooh, the space in between. How many of y'all are there right now? This is for you. I've begun to understand that tender feeling of uncertainty isn't a mistake. It's not a place to rush through. It's a threshold. It's where a lot of things are built. It's where your creativity is its most potent. It is where finding a place that we call home, that doesn't include four walls and a roof, comes into play. For me, certainty has never been the place where I've been able to be my most creative and make my most impactful art. And certainty has never been the space in where I create my dreams. It's usually in these in-between spaces that lights a fire within me to find home within myself so that I can be in tune to my belonging and be really in presence, even though I know I haven't quite made it where I'm going. This is for those who have that homesickness for a life that hasn't arrived yet. Home isn't something you find when everything makes sense. It's what you create when everything doesn't. Maybe home is the way the light hits you in the morning and the way the sun warms your face on a cold day. Home is the way your breath anchors you when nothing feels certain. When's the last time you took an intentional breath and felt the presence within your own body hold you sweetly? Maybe home is meeting yourself where you are again and again, even if where you are isn't where you thought you would be. Home is a devotion to the process. It's the way your feet carry you forward even when you don't even really know where you're going. It's the way in which you are following your heart and hoping that your mind will catch up. Home is the way you remind yourself that when you feel lost, you still have yourself. How can you belong to yourself right now? How can you find home in yourself right now? For me, creativity has always helped me find my home. I write for the girl who used to sit in the apple tree, who would dream about a life bigger than she could even imagine. Write for the whippoorwills out my window who inspired me and reminded me to tune into nature as home. I would write in hopes that each word revealed a new way. I would paint knowing that each color that tugged at my heart, or each bird I wanted to paint, or flower, or shape I wanted to paint, was an understanding of what was building and what was keeping me going and what was helping me feel supported when nothing else felt like it was under my feet. The gap between who I am and who I am becoming can sometimes make it feel like I'll never get across the gap. But each creative act I take, each word I write, each doodle I draw is me building the bridge between the gap. It's me showing up as her, even when I'm still me. What if instead of resisting the unknown and avoiding the unknown and staying in these nestled little homes that you've outgrown, you trust that stepping out into a new chapter before you even see it is how you get there? When I reflect on my life, I realize that I have been in this in-between place, building my next life dozens of times. And as much as I often feel untethered and lost, and it's hard to find my ground, and it's hard to make progress, and it's hard to feel embodied sometimes in these unknown in-between places, it's always what's led me to a more beautiful place, and it's always what's helped me create the next chapter of my life. And learning to sit in the, I'm finished with this chapter, but yet I'm not yet started with this one, so what do I do with this space, is where most of my growth has been for me in life. It's where I've learned to create and tap into that creative energy, and to practice radical acceptance and understanding and patience. Is a little patience. Every time I've kept my heart open and tried to keep my head to not be the one leading and my heart to be the one leading, I have found myself in new chapters and have marveled at the way in which, wow, okay, I went from feeling just completely lost that my husband died, and I fought for so much more time and so much more life and so much more togetherness, and I fought, and in the end, ALS was relentless, and there was a much bigger plan at play than I could see in the moment. And then I went to live in the mountains, and I couldn't figure out my way, and I was lost, and I was just literally going in any direction that I was pulled in. And I quite honestly was not graceful in the in-between. And I'm not shaming that version of Hope. She didn't have the same perspective of the in-between that I have now, which is why I send love to the in-between. Because now looking back, I can see how much navigating that in-between and finding my way to my next path, my next chapter, creating the bridge, helped me grow as a human, as a therapist, as a friend, as a person. Person and human are the same thing. Having that understanding of what the in-between helped me create helps me have a little bit more ease. But I won't lie, I still have to constantly send myself the reminder of what the in-between can hold, and not allow all the anxieties that can come up to sway me. Every in-between has helped me create my peace, my flow, my art, my life, my dreams. Every in-between has given me enough friction, enough to motivate and push me forward in a way that, had this transition been smooth, one chapter to the other, I wouldn't have had the same growth or experience. To be home in the in-between is to be present, to breathe my way through it. It is to remember that as long as I am waking up in the morning and putting my feet on the ground, of whatever ground it is I happen to be staying at, which has been a lot in the last 6 months, that it is my feet on that ground. It doesn't matter that the ground beneath me is changing and the ground beneath me is unknown. It's my feet. I am confident in the way in which I can plant my feet in a place and find my path forward. In this letter that I'm writing you with love, I want you to remember all the in-between spaces that you've lived in, and how you have created the next chapter out of it. Isn't it cool to think about how you created something beautiful out of thin air? Isn't it amazing to marvel at the way in which you've been able to take the place that you are in and the space in between where you're going and make magic out of that? Isn't it amazing when you marvel at every time you witnessed growth within yourself as to where you are showing up as one version and you know you're ready to show up as the other, and you filled in those gaps? Every time you take note of the way in which you fill in the space in between, that's how you keep going forward and gaining the momentum. When I say that I help people create a life that feels like home, I help them create a life where they feel like they belong, where they can take deep breaths, where they have peace, where they know how worthy they are, when they know their capacity to sit in the uncomfortableness of the great unknown that is the space between, as well as their ability to create the next chapter, to be the person they need to be to get to the other side of the in-between. I help them realize what is clutter in their homes, which is maybe bad habits or relationships that are hurting them. I help them know what they want to call in: love, connection, clarity, creativity, peace, joy, healing. A longing for home is a longing for presence. It's a longing for being able to be in your life so much, whether it's you're there anxious or excited, in grief or in love or in joy or in hopefulness, or even in sometimes that complete lost feeling where you have no idea which direction you're going and everything seems upside down. Being present in it and knowing that you are still home. You are still home within yourself, and you will be able to turn everything right side up again. You will be able to find joy again. You will be able to create the bridge between who you are and who you're growing to be, from this chapter to the next chapter. If you're feeling stretched between what is and what could be, and you've 1 foot here and 1 foot here, and you don't know what to do, here's my best advice. Put both feet in the unknown. Put it there, in the space in between, and know that you are not there forever, but there is a purpose to it. There is a lot of blessings that will come from it, and that you have the capacity to sit in the space in between. And sometimes the things that you create in this space launches you to an even bigger chapter than you could have even seen for your life. When I think about my fighting spirit, and what I mean by that is I fought for love, I fought for Steve, I fight to be heard, I fight for other people to be heard, I fight for equality, I fight for people's healing, I fight. I realized that I can come across really quite forceful, and I've learned recently that forcefulness isn't actually going to help me bridge the gap between who I am and who I want to be, where I am, where I want to be. I'm trying to force this growth of my business. I'm trying to force people to follow my channel. I'm trying to force the happenings with finances. And what I've realized recently is there's a lot of surrender that has to happen, and there's a lot of peace and acceptance of where you're at that needs to happen. And this is why finding home in the space in between is so important to me, because forcefulness isn't the way. And you know, I've always kind of been described as a force to be reckoned with, and my forceful spirit has gotten me a lot of places, but it's not the most palatable. And I've realized that it's not the most palatable for me even. I don't feel well when I'm trying to be forceful. I need to just keep showing up in what I'm doing authentically, in that ease, in that assuredness that I know what my creative abilities can create. I know what realities I have created in these moments in between before, and I know what realities I'm capable of creating. I know right now when there's a lot of forces at play politically in the climate that my forcefulness of my way and my path and my direction, and it's not it. And so I've had to surrender a little bit, and I've had to find a little more softness and a little more peace. And I have this habit when I'm really excitable, and maybe it's also the ADHD, but I have to take responsibility for how I impact people. So when I get really excitable, I talk over people, and it's like the forcefulness, and I just want my point to be heard. It's just so important. What I have to say is going to help you. It's going to heal you. It's going to change you. It's going to impact you. It's going to fix the discussion we're having. It's going to be the missing piece. And really, what's really been the most impactful thing for me is pause. And so when I'm talking about there being a space in between, and I'm in the space in between, I feel like there's also needing to be a space made in between me and my responses, me and my continual force of wanting to constantly be creating something new. Sometimes there needs to be a little bit of space for that something new to build, for that something new to breathe, right? For that something new to be different than the last 10 things I created. And if I keep trying to force it instead of showing up to the table with peace and with trust and with a sense of belonging here and knowing that I'm a creative and I have something really important to say, trusting the message in my heart instead of trying to force it, trusting its timing, then I can create the space. I can create the slowness. Interestingly, I am able to see in the way in which I show up as a therapist as a person who doesn't tend to speak over people. Now, there are occasions where I'm like, whoa, 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 and I have to kind of stop a spiral or maybe reflect something to somebody that they just said because it's so important. But for the most part, I do the talking over people with relationships, personal relationships. And those relationships are just as important to me as my working relationships. And that's something that I've had to become very reflective of. Why is hope being able to show up here but not here? And what's the space in between? And I think what the real space in between is the way in which we identify what we're here for with certain relationships. And you know, with my clients, I'm here to help them. I'm here to be of service. I'm here to hold space for them. Well, is that not what I'm here for with my friends too? I want to create a life that feels like home for my friends and family too. I want to practice creating the space and making a home in the space in between. When I'm speaking about recognizing the person that I am and the person that I'm becoming and being able to hold space for the space in between, hold space for the space. There are themes that show up in life that are beyond just one part. I am in an in-between of where I'm living. There is a light at the end of the tunnel, and things are making forward progress. And I am more than not living in that space of trusting and being at home within myself, which is helping me feel more confident in the choices I am making towards actually acquiring a physical home. And I have learned to trust the process and not try to force it to just have a quick resolution, because what I understand is some of the juiciest lessons of life live in that space. And when I'm holding myself accountable for my part of who I'm showing up as and who I want to be showing up as, it has to come from love. And that's why I've been writing myself love letters. And I decided to call this the love letter to those who are experiencing and moment of in between. Because what I've realized is I don't need to force myself. I need to have a surrender and some peace and some belonging and some acceptance, and most importantly, love. Love is what I need to show up in all of the in-betweenness. And love creates the way. Love creates the way. I want to make that into a shirt. Love creates the way. My love letter to all of you who are living in this space in between is to find your home in it. Find your home, find your peace, find where you belong. Remember your breath. Remember that absolute presence, just being so present in your life, is really the sweet spot. Not trying to rush through, but just to be where you're at. To love where you're at. And to create the bridge. And so when you're in an in-between space, oftentimes we can look to other people for home. And I just want to tell you from experience, home and other people, even if you're in a long-term relationship, even if you are living in a home with another person, isn't the same presence as home within yourself. Because we can't be looking at our relationships to help regulate our nervous systems all the time. It's not the other person's responsibility to manage our emotions and to unravel our knots. And as nice as it is that people often hold space for us, we have to make sure we are in our presence, in our life, unraveling our own knots, showing up to our own nervous systems and feelings, and learning to regulate and learning to build the capacity to hold some of the uncomfortableness. And that's what I talk about with building home within yourself. It's trusting yourself to manage all of it and learning to find our way back to peace and presence without always needing someone else to be there to do so. And sometimes when we're having an in-between space, that feeling is so uncomfortable that we can find ourselves just latching on to somebody else or entertaining energies that may or may not be helpful to us. And it's very important to be discerning of where you put your energy, whose energy you allow in your space, as well as what you're creating and who you're creating with, and what you're regulating and who you're regulating with. And the space in between is a very vulnerable time to get caught up in some of the ways in which we unhealthily depend on other people to regulate us and to make the path for us. And I promise, when you lean on yourself more and you remember your own strength and your own abilities and your own capacities, oh boy, does that launch you forward in the most insanely beautiful ways. I'm here if you need help processing this any further. I'm here if you find yourself needing just a little bit of guidance on how you can lean on yourself. I'm here to teach you some skills to help you regulate your nervous system. I'm here to help you learn to really feel confident in your ability to find home within yourself. I think that's where therapy gets confused sometimes, is sometimes people assume I'm trying to create a home for people. But the truth is, I'm creating a safe space for people to create home for themselves. My ultimate goal as a therapist is to empower people to stand in their own embodiment of, hey, there's a space in between. I'm going to make home in it, and then I'm going to create the next chapter